There we go. Hi everyone, welcome to our budget-friendly lunchbox webinar. My name's Alyssa and I'll be your host today. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land we're meeting on. For me in Monash, that's the Wurundjeri, Woiwurrung and Boonwurrung people, and recognise their continuing connection to land and waterways. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and extend this to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. We're so glad you can join us. Thank you so much for making the time. I'm about to introduce Leanne, our speaker. After her presentation, there'll be time for some questions. So if you have any questions that occur to you throughout the presentation, feel free to pop them in the Q&A section. But without further ado, please join me in welcoming Leanne Elliston, Senior Dietitian at Nutrition Australia.
Thank you, Alyssa, and thanks for the lovely introduction. It's great to be here again after last week talking about lunchboxes for new school starters. So today we're going to be talking all about how to make our lunchboxes a bit more budget friendly, because we know that, food is pricey. So as Alyssa mentioned, I am a dietitian, accredited practicing dietitian. I'm also the CEO of Nutrition Australia ACT. So I'm actually located in Canberra. And we have led National Lunchbox Week campaign for some 8 years. So it's a big part of what we do here in Canberra. Before I go on, I'd also like to acknowledge the country that I am coming from, and that is the Ngunnawal country, and pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. Okay, a little bit about us, Nutrition Australia. So many of you would have probably heard of us. We're a not-for-profit. We're actually a health promotion charity. And we're all about helping Australian communities build nourishing and equitable food environments. We think everyone has a right to healthy foods, and we're out there advocating for helping people make those healthier choices. And for instance, today, it's about how we can pack lunchboxes within whatever restrained budget we might be living with. National Lunchbox Week is a campaign, occurs every year. And it happens at the beginning of the school year. So we just had it a couple of weeks ago in the second week of Feb. And it's all about supporting families and schools, early childhood settings as well, across all of Australia, to make lunchboxes enjoyable, nourishing and pressure-free for all children. So you can actually have a look at the hashtag on your socials and see some of the campaign material that went out, and also some organisations that might have shared some lovely stories about what they were doing during Lunchbox Week. And we also have a website, which is lunchboxweek.org. And throughout this session, I will be referring to some of the resources that you can access from the website. So whether it's fact sheets or recipes, there's some really good info there. So an overview from what we'll talk about today. This is obviously focused on budget, but I'll give a little bit of a brief rundown on the sorts of steps we want to consider when packing a lunchbox, just to make sure we've got everything covered. I'll go through some DIY snacks. It's easy to fall into the world of convenience and pre-packaged foods, but they are the most expensive foods that you're going to put in the lunchboxes. So we're going to sort of look at how we can get around that and make our own simple and lasting snacks that would be perfectly fine for the lunchbox, instead of paying a small fortune for some of those packaged items. You do pay for convenience after all. We'll talk about how we can use our leftovers as well. So it could be our dinner leftovers, and bring those into the lunchbox too, because that's a really, really good way to make life easy for ourselves. And usually our evening meals are pretty nourishing. So if we can bring some of those evening meals in for lunch the next day, then we're going to be saving on multiple fronts and being well nourished as well. I'll talk a little bit about some little smart shopping tips and hacks. And what things to look out for. Many of you may already be onto this, but it doesn't hurt to go through it. And then a little bit on when we are shopping and purchasing foods, what we're looking for, the nutrition label. And I'll finish up with food safety because, of course, we need to make sure whatever we put in the lunchbox is going to be safe for consumption and doesn't increase our risk of food poisoning. All right, so when it comes to eating at school, around 30% or so of what children's food intake over the day actually comes from what is in their lunchbox. So it's a fair chunk of their daily nutrition. And we know that kids that eat well whilst at school, they're going to have greater energy. That's going to keep them going for longer. And that means both to play and to concentrate as well. The right sorts of foods will help to keep their alertness. They'll help to feed their brain with the energy it needs to concentrate. And then it will help them to learn and improve their mental clarity. So at the end of the day, well-nourished kids, particularly during school time, are going to be better learners and they'll grow up to be healthier children and adults as well. So when it comes to the lunchbox, I think you can all agree that we want it to be nutritious, of course. Convenient is a very important factor. I have 2 older teen children now, and I've gone through, I feel like, half my life packing lunchboxes, and convenience is a huge part, plays a huge part, because you have busy mornings and you're flat out getting yourself out the door and then having to make a lunchbox as well. So finding ways to make lunchboxes easier and more convenient to throw together is huge. Budget friendly, of course, which is what today's session is going to focus on. And at the end of the day, it has to be enjoyable, because if these foods aren't enjoyable, our little kids aren't going to eat them. And if they're not going to eat them, then so begins all sorts of problems. So it also has to be enjoyable, and how we're going to make that enjoyable is dependent on our children, our likes and dislikes, and how comfortable they are around different foods. So just as a little bit of an intro, simple steps to a lunchbox. So the sorts of things we're looking for when we are packing a lunchbox. First thing is, think of a main item, the main menu item. So it could be the sandwich, the wrap, the roll. It could be last night's leftover frittata. It could be a paper pasta salad or a rice paper roll. So it's going to be the lunch, I guess, is that main item. And then we want to make sure that there's a bit of a fruit or a vegetable snack in there as well. So that could be the whole fruit, whether it's a banana, a mandarin, a peach, or an apple. You could cut that up, obviously, particularly for littlies. Some veggie sticks, so if it's carrots or cucumber, celery. Canned fruit and canned vegetables are fine. I'll go through, talk about some ideas shortly of the little baby vegetables, which can be a little bit pricey, and we'll explore that in a moment. Think about a second snack as well. So this could be like your little lunch or your recess. So that could be whether it's yogurt or some crackers. I like to think of a dairy option in here. It just helps to balance it out and round out the lunchbox. So cheese and crackers or yogurt. It could be something like something that you baked yourself, so little mini muffins or some popcorn. Could even just be something really simple like a hard-boiled egg. And then finally, don't forget the drink. So water is obviously the best. Even those little UHT milk poppers are great, and you can freeze those and pop them in the lunchbox, and it helps to keep the lunchbox cool. And then by the time children have it, it's like a slushy milk drink. It's delicious. I love them. And yeah, always water as well. So it really doesn't have to be a big ordeal. If you think of that 1, 2, 3, 4 steps, and you know, one of those steps is obviously going to include some sort of fruit or vegetable option, then we're going to be pretty good. And when we think of that variety, another way to look at it is go, grow, and glow foods. So there's a fact sheet that you can get from the Lunchbox Week website that goes into more detail of what we mean by go, grow, and glow. But I'll cover it a little bit now and just give you some tips when it comes to keeping budget in mind. So when it comes to the go foods, think of these foods as our energy foods. So they're sort of like the carbohydrate that fuels our muscles, and it also fuels our brain. So if we don't have these foods in our body during the day, we're going to get quite tired. We won't have the energy to get up and play with our friends and do sport. And we also won't have the energy in our brain to think and concentrate. So pretty important, these foods, particularly for growing children. So we're thinking things like bready type options, or your grain foods. It could be pasta, rice, couscous, and often this particular food group or type of foods takes up a major part of the lunchbox, and so it should, because it is the main source of energy. Some budget tips here is look for specials. Something I really like to do is at the end of the day, when the breads are going to be running out and they're going to get rid of them quick, they'll mark them down. So some supermarkets will mark down the breads at the end of the day. And so that's when you bulk up, and like I would buy up the little hot cross buns or some loaves of bread, and then I pop it in the freezer, and they'll be fine in the freezer. Something like a hot cross bun or a fruit bun in the freezer, and you just take it out each morning, is perfect. And it's so convenient. And when you find the ones on special, it's a real bargain. So that's a bit of a hack there to look out for. And just, yeah, keep that bread stored in the freezer, because if you leave your bread out on the bench, it'll invariably go, it will start to go off over a couple of days and just become a little bit hard, whatever bread you're choosing. And then you're less likely to eat it all. And so it risks having food wastage too. So minimizing food wastage and, eating on a budget go hand in hand. So that's a good thing. Other good things to think about are when it's pasta or rice, or leftover pasta from the night before, and turning that into a salad is a really good option as well. So saving on waste, and it's budget conscious. Pasta's pretty cheap as well. All right, so that's your go foods. Moving on to our glow foods. So thinking foods that support our muscle growth and bones as well. So thinking, those kinds of foods. So it's really your dairy foods, it's your protein foods, it's your meat and your alternatives as well. So whether it's like yogurt or cheese stick, now these sorts of foods can be the pricier foods in the trolley. Dairy is quite expensive nowadays, particularly yogurt and cheese. The price of that has gone up quite a lot. Custards, milk poppers, those sorts of things are also really good there. I usually encourage people, just to save money, is getting your big tubs of yogurt and just decanting into the smaller containers like this. Instead of buying cheese sticks, buy a big block of cheese and cut your own sticks is another option. When it comes to the meat and alternatives, again, meat is very expensive. So always be mindful of, making sure you've got some leftovers from roast pork or roast lamb or whatever you could be having. But also thinking beyond meat. So eggs, hard-boiled eggs are fantastic. The canned salmon and tuna, they usually always have those half price every now and then, and that's when I would stock up on my little mini cans of tuna. Hummus dip is fantastic. Love it. Can be pricey. There's quite a variation of prices when it comes to hummus dip. I just get the cheapest you can get. And usually it's reasonably affordable. Or you could make your own from chickpeas, tinned chickpeas, and blitzing those up with a little bit of tahini and a bit of garlic in there. Otherwise, tinned legumes, so baked beans, chickpeas, kidney beans, straight out of the tin are great, and you can actually turn those into like little salads and stuff. And tofu cubes. Tofu is really cheap. I just cooked up with some tofu this morning with a client, and we were talking about how cheap tofu is. It's a really budget-conscious protein source, and it's a vegetarian, so it ticks both boxes there if you're vegetarian. So that's the grow food. So again, think of those, and including some sort of grow food in the lunchbox is really good, because that's, again, the food for their muscle growth, their skin, their hair growth, their nails, and bones as well. And our glow food. So this is really your fruits and vegetables. So that was one of those steps when we're thinking about packing a lunchbox, is to think about, is there some sort of fruit or vegetable option in there? Is there that colourful element? And when we say glow, they give us mostly our vitamins and minerals. They help out to support a strong immune system and help the body to glow. So it's people can kind of relate to that word, which I love. So fresh fruit, it could be diced fruit salad, or you could get the tinned fruit options, fruit purees, even dried fruit. We count those as sources of fruit. When it comes to vegetables, that what will go in the lunchbox, so it could be leftover cooked up vegetables. It could be fresh salad type vegetables, or chopped up into sticks and so on. We also count our kidney beans and chickpeas and lentils as a vegetable option, as well as a meat alternative. So you get more bang for your buck with legumes. Love the legumes. So when we're thinking about this particular group of foods, obviously the in-season varieties are going to be more affordable. Peaches and nectarines are still in season at the moment, are great for the lunchbox, but I wouldn't probably be buying them if they've been transported across the world. They're going to cost a lot more money. And if you can't find much, if your little ones or your children are big fans of stone fruits, for instance, then and you can't get stone fruits in winter, then just opt for the tin varieties. They're fine as well. And again, thinking tin varieties, you can get those little tubs, but you're probably going to save more money if you decant out of a big tin and put it in the little containers. So again, those little cost-saving measures are worth considering. All right. So it's always a good idea to plan and pack ahead. I do admire people who have a weekly lunchbox plan, and I think good on you, well done. If you have some kind of plan written up on the fridge, that's great. Think about working with your children to come up with a plan. What are we going to put in our lunchboxes, and then shopping against that plan so you don't buy anything that you hadn't planned to get in the first place. And you can also budget accordingly. So you might actually plan based on what's on special that week. So getting the local supermarket catalogues, flicking through the catalogue and saying, okay, I can see these crackers are on special. I can see this type of meats on special. Let's plan to have our lunch boxes that incorporate those sorts of foods. So it's really, really quite useful and helps to prevent that extra discretionary spending where we can actually lose a lot of money. And that could be, yeah, like I said, it could be a plan on the fridge. If you're like me, it's a plan in your head, but there is some kind of plan and system in place. You want to batch cook and freeze. So I'm going to go through some recipes that are ideal for cooking up on the weekend when you've got a bit of time, and then putting them in the freezer so they're just grab and go items then during the week. And then I'll talk a little bit more about some of those great leftover foods that we can explore for the lunchbox. And always remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. Lunchboxes do not have to be perfect. Provide a good enough lunchbox is fine. And I always say, even if it's just a Vegemite sandwich, some cut up cheese, it could be some crackers, some whole grain crackers, some pita crisp, which I'll talk to you about shortly, or popcorn, an apple or a banana, whatever's in season, that is fine. And sometimes children like to have the same food over and over. That's okay too. Every now and then you might bring in a little bit of variety as well, just to change it up. Okay, so let's look at our cook and freeze items. So I'm talking here snacks that you can cook in advance and store in the freezer. So this is just some of our go-to recipes that we like, and you can get these off the Lunchbox Week website. So we've got our cheesy corn muffins. That's a nice savoury option. That could even pass as a lunch food for, on some days. Because it's got the cheese, it's got the egg, and in some instances you could put a bit of diced ham in there as well. So it's actually has that protein element as well. Savoury scrolls, I love these ones, and kids love making these ones. Actually, this is one of our popular ones that we do with our school holiday cooking program. So we make up the dough and just, it's like a pizza, but you turn it into a scroll and then cut it up, and it just makes it a really simple lunchboxy food. And again, that in itself could be a lunch food, like the main item in the lunchbox. If you wanted to, you could go sweet. So you could just, in place of the savoury options, you could put a little bit of cinnamon, brown sugar, maybe some chopped up or grated apple in there, and you've got a sweet version, and some raisins. That's beautiful as well. They freeze really well. So when you bake them, you pop them in the freezer the day once they're cooled out of the oven, and then when you get them out the day of eating, they're like the day that you took them out of the oven. They just stay lovely and fresh. It's beautiful. Apple cinnamon muffins, good old muffins. They've got to be a great lunchbox item. This is my recipe, and it's a wholesome recipe. It's got some wholemeal flour in there, and we use the whole apple as well. And then banana bread, which is a favourite. as well. Again, this sort of thing I would slice up, wrap up the banana bread in a plastic wrap or whatever it is you might have in little containers, pop it in the freezer, and then it's just a grab into the lunchbox and off you go. And what's great about these frozen items is that they keep the lunchbox cool, and then by little lunch, they've actually thawed out and they're beautiful and ready and lovely and fresh to eat. So that's just some ideas of those that work well in the freezer. Now let's think about some snacks that will last in the fridge or the pantry, so you don't even need the freezer. I love these these ones as well, because you know sometimes you've only got so much freezer space because you just bought all that bread on special. So think about planning out what you're going to cook in advance, and have you got the room to store it. So leaning on these sorts of recipes are great. Pita crisp. So many of you may have made these before. They're my go-to cracker, basically. So what's good about this is you can use up your old flatbread that you haven't got through at the end of the week and turn it into pita crisp. So if it's starting to go a little bit old, a little bit crumbly, even if there's some moldy bits, I just pick off the moldy bits and then cut it, because it's not going to hurt you. Cut it up. Sprinkle a little bit of Parmesan cheese. You could put some other flavorings on there, a bit of paprika. If you want a bit spicy, put some chili on there. And there's your pita crisp. And they will last in the pantry for months, as long as any cracker will. If it's in an airtight container, they're brilliant. A really good alternative to buying crackers. Crispy roasted chickpeas. So here's our meat alternative that we've turned into a lovely, nourishing snack. We cook it in advance. It's just tin chickpeas. You can get a tin of chickpeas for like about $1.20, and rinse it off. Put some lovely flavour through it. In this case, we've done cumin and paprika, bit of olive oil in the oven until they cook through and become lovely and crispy, and that'll stay in the pantry in an airtight container for weeks. Love those. Other things, so things that would work well in the fridge. I love my little little energy bites. People might call them bliss balls. These ones are the apricot ones. So it's just some dried up apricots and cereal blended together. And then we've also got our little choc balls. And this is nut-free options as recipes as well. You do need a bit of a processor to make it happen. And they will stay in the fridge for a couple of weeks. No problem at all. So again, these are your long-lasting snacks, grab-and-go items, and they're pretty cheap. Now, I mentioned leftovers, so thinking leftovers for your lunchbox. I love if I cook up a roast or even just a barbecue, leftover cold meat from the barbecue. Meatballs are fabulous. Always think of the roast meat that's perfect for sandwiches or even chopped up in a salad. Frittata, so you could have leftover frittata from the night before, or you could use your leftover vegetables to turn into a frittata. And they also work quite well in vegetable fritters as well. And rice paper rolls are a good way to use up leftover salad, or even stir fry because of that lovely Asian flavour. If you mix up your stir fry with some just some vermicelli noodles, that's perfect to roll into a rice paper roll. And it's different and it's yummy and it's using up your leftovers, so it's saving waste. So we've got a fact sheet there on tips for using your leftovers. And these are just some of the recipes that you could do for dinner food that can then make extra that provide leftovers to be popped in the lunchbox the next day. So they've got falafel recipe there, meatballs, chicken nuggets, and pasta salad. Just to give you some ideas, because I know that at the end of the day, we just need ideas and inspiration to keep us going. We do get beyond Vegemite sandwiches. Now, I want to talk to you about some smart shopping tips as well. So as I mentioned earlier, you can buy your cheese sticks, which are very convenient and have exactly the same nutrition as a block of tasty cheese. And yet you'll be paying more than 3 times as much by buying the cheese sticks compared to the block of tasty cheese. So it makes sense to get the block of tasty cheese and just cut up the cheese in your own cheese sticks and put them in a little container. So you are 100% paying 3 times more for the convenience of these little pre-packaged cheese sticks. when we're looking at different foods and comparing what's the best value, you want to go by the price per kilogram. And what's great now is that supermarkets by law have to declare what you are paying per kilogram, or it could be per 100 grams that they present that information. And for anyone who's just grabbing and going, they say, oh, $5.50, that's cheaper than $10.50, so it's easy to grab that first. But think beyond that and see that, you know, this is actually much greater value, your kilo block of cheese. And more versatile. You can grate it, you can turn it into slices for sandwiches as well. So yeah, always go for the big block. All right. Okay, here's another example. So we talk about carrots and the baby vegetables. We love our little baby vegetables. They're fantastic, but you are paying for that. So as you can see, those little snackable carrots, you're going to be paying, well, right there, it's like 15 times more for those little snacking carrots compared to just a bag of carrots, which are so cheap, $1.30 a kilo. Like, how cheap is that? So popping a carrot in the lunchbox is a really good thing. And I quite like, so you can get sort of the bags, they're smallish carrots, but they're not as tiny as those snackables, which admittedly are kind of cute. You could chop up these bigger carrots into the same size carrot sticks, and you're saving 15 times by going with the bag of carrots. So it's pretty obvious what I do. I don't think I've ever purchased those snackable carrots because I cannot stomach the expense when I can go 15 times cheaper and get a bag of carrots. I mean, who said that eating healthy has to be expensive? Some other ideas for you is, now what I've got here is I'm showing a couple of examples. So these flatbread dippers, which are kind of nice. I really like them. They're just made out of flatbread. You're paying $3.46 per 100 grams of those. Or you could get your wraps. Oopsie, gone the wrong way. You could get your wraps and turn them into pita crisps. And so when you break that down to what that looks like per serve, your bought product is around 90 cents per 20-gram serve, because that's what a serve is according to the back of the box of these dippers. And if I made the equivalent serving size, I'd be spending 13 cents per serve. So again, huge savings by just making it yourself, using some pita bread, and the stuff that you might have otherwise thrown out or given to the ducks or the birds or the chooks, you've turned into something else that is quite delicious and great for the lunchbox. So thinking of those kind of tactics, this was a common one that my children would have and we still have in our cupboard. Popcorn. Oh my goodness. So this is quite an eye-opener, this one. So you've got your variations here. So I've got the more expensive brand here, and that worked out at $6.15 per 100 grams. And just so you know, I took all of these figures. So they are the latest figures, the cost from the supermarket online. And that was just over the weekend. So in Canberra, this is how much you're paying right now for these various items. So yeah, your more expensive popcorn works out at $6.15 per 100 gram. You're obviously going for the more, like there's 10 packs in this one, so it's going to be more bulk bought, and it's a more home brandy type option. So it is a lot cheaper to go with those. Or you could make it yourself and get yourself one of those popcorn makers. You can even put it in a paper bag in the microwave, and that works quite well. And it's only 49 cents per 100 grams. So look at the difference between those. And I'm just going to take this a little bit further, and I'm going to show you how much you pay per little bag, little serve. So if you were to buy this more expensive popcorn, it's 80 cents per little bag in the lunchbox. If you were to get this home brand one, that's much cheaper. That's pretty good. Their serve sizes are a bit smaller too. Is 27.5 cents per gram. If you were to pop your own popcorn in those popcorn poppers, you just go to Kmart and get a $30 popcorn popper. They're not that expensive, and it's the best investment, and they last a long time. 5 cents per 10-gram serve. So look at that variation, and over the time that you are making a lunchbox every single day, you're going to be saving by making these little, doing these little tricks. All right, I think that's the last. All right, the other tip I've got for you, as I mentioned earlier, is decant and save. So buying products like the yogurt in a bigger tub and decanting that in a container, the hummus dip, the tinned vegetables and tinned fruits, decanting those. So you end up having 1,000 little containers everywhere, like I do in my house, but they are handy and they're really useful and you want them. And I think the thing is just making sure your children can open them and trying to remember to bring them back home as well. Now this one over here, I've got a range of cereals. So I've talked about cereal and dried fruit pick and mix here. So you might just have different types of dried fruit. You might have sultanas, or you could have some chopped up dried apricots or something, and they are pretty expensive, some of those dried fruits. So go for the cheaper ones like the sultanas and maybe just a little bit of those more expensive ones. And then get your cereal. So those breakfast cereals that come in like the bite form, they can actually be quite very nourishing and high in fiber, a really good alternative to like a sweet biscuit, for instance. And so I really love to do these little pick and mix where there's a bit of fruit. There might be some seeds like pepita seeds or some sunflower seeds, and then a range of different breakfast bite type cereals. Just those nice little ones that, they're easy to eat, and it creates like this almost like well, it's a pick and mix. It's like I can't remember the name of it, but when you go hiking, those kinds of dishes, packed foods. So they're just some more ideas that you, again, buying slightly in a larger quantity and decanting into the smaller container for children to take to school. And the food's it's exactly the same, but you're just not paying for that convenience. As you can see, the convenience is what you're spending the money on. The nourishment is still the same, if not better, because I like to see this kind of eating rather than little packs of biscuits and sweet biscuits as well. So when it comes to buying things like your breakfast cereal or whatever, you do need to check the nutrition label. It's a good idea to do that. Try not to be, I guess, deceived by what might be a health claim on the front of the package. So a good rule of thumb, and I'm just going to go through some of the nutrients to look out for when you are reading the label, is to go always compare per 100 grams. And when it comes to things like crackers and biscuits, saturated fat is something we look out for, and we want to aim for less than 3 grams per 100 grams as a rule of thumb. Sugars, so when it comes to, say, for instance, muesli bars or sweet biscuits in particular, they can be very high in sugar, up around, 30 grams per 100 grams, 40 grams per 100 grams. Go for those which have less than 15 grams per 100 grams of sugar is a good rule of thumb. If it's, say, dried fruit, then of course it's going to have a higher concentration of sugar. Because it's fruit, it's the fruit sugar that's left behind. So that'll be much higher, and I'll usually sort of not be too concerned about that because there's so much other nutrition within that fruit, or you mix it up with other foods like the cereals that I mentioned. Fiber is something we look, oh no, I'm getting sodium next. So sodium, we kind of particularly look out for the sodium in things like your savory biscuits and crackers as well, much like the saturated fat. And they can get really salty. So a good rule of thumb is to look for less than 400 milligrams per 100 grams for those. And then finally, fiber, which is what we want more of. If we get the whole grain or wholemeal varieties of biscuits and crackers and muesli bars, then we're going to be getting more fiber. And a good rule of thumb again here is more than 5 grams per 100 grams. So they're just some good figures. When you are scanning the label, you don't have to go through every single nutrient. Just pick up these ones and just do a little quick comparison and see if you can find the healthier options. There's the label reading resources as well that you can get from our website. The health star rating is another quick glance kind of at the front of the pack means that you can determine whether this is a healthier version over that. So it goes beyond the health claims that some manufacturers might put on their package. The health star rating is determined by an algorithm, and all of the processed foods that use it use the same algorithm. So you can actually do direct comparisons of foods within their category. So if you're looking at muesli bars, there's a special algorithm for sort of sweet kind of foods and muesli bars. If you're looking at crackers, savory crackers, there's a different algorithm for that. And same goes for dairy foods, breakfast cereals. They actually have different algorithms. So always compare within those categories. Don't compare a dairy food star value to, say, a breakfast cereal, because you can't. They've got too many different nutrients. A good idea is to go for more stars, so 4 or more stars. Obviously, 5 stars, it's pretty good. It's going to be very healthy. If it's only 1 or 2 stars, there's not much nourishment there. It might be really high in salt or sugar, might not have much fiber or any actual nutritional value, so vitamins as well. And you'll also find there's a bit of a guide on that fact sheet that talks about the label reading about the stars. Now, not all products have health star rating, and so there is this really cool app you can get called Food Switch, and just type in Food Switch in your phone and you'll find it. Download it. It's free. It's put together by the George Institute, and what they've done is they've actually applied the algorithm to all these packaged foods out there and identified what the health star rating would be for those products, even though not all products have to have that health star rating on their package. So you can simply scan with this app. You scan the food item or the package, and then it would tell you what it would be in star value. And what's even really great is that it will say, oh, okay, here's some other items similar to this within this category that actually have more stars. So maybe you could consider getting these healthier options instead. So I highly encourage everyone to have that app on their phone, and even just go home and start to scan the food that you've got in the cupboard and see what sort of star rating they get. And it will tell you which ones would be better when you go shopping next time. So a really good tool to have in your pocket. And finally, I want to cover a bit around making sure our lunchboxes are safe. So we've talked about, the steps of a healthy lunchbox. We talked about all of the different elements of the lunchbox, the type of foods that we could be putting in the lunchbox, and thinking budget consciousness there. And we really need to be mindful of keeping that food safe. So particularly if we're using leftovers, many of those leftover foods will probably be of a protein origin. So they could be egg-based or meat or dairy, and they're the foods that are particularly, potentially hazardous, which means bacteria will thrive really well in those foods if those foods are kept at room temperature for too long. So we want to keep the lunchbox nice and cool. If we're just doing crackers and whole fruit and Vegemite sandwich, there's not a lot of potentially hazardous foods in that. But once we start to bring in more of those delicious leftover foods and salads and so on, the risk of bacterial growth starts to increase. So we can manage that. We still want those foods in the lunchbox. We just have to look after them more. So always make sure that when you're packing the lunchbox that we're using those insulated containers, keep the cool in, bringing in a frozen milk popper or your frozen muffin that you've made on the weekend helps also to keep that lunchbox cool, or those little ice bricks as well. So if you need to have that cold element into the lunchbox, and keeping it insulated will really help to keep the bacterial growth under control. Keeping it clean as well. So obviously when we're using all of those leftovers or decanting a lot of those products into containers, you got to keep make sure that those containers are well cleaned, because by the end of the day, when they come home with all the scrappy bits in there, there's a lot of bacteria growing on those that leftover crumbs and whatever that's in the containers. So always give them a really good clean in the dishwasher if you can. And it's just something to, it should be second nature to think about how we're looking after those foods. When you are using some of your leftover foods, so it could be, say, for example, some leftover barbecue skewers or something, make sure that you get those leftovers in the fridge within 2 hours of when they've come off the barbecue. So if you've made a whole heap of extra food intentionally, or maybe accidentally you had a lot left over, then you really want to get that leftover food into the fridge as soon as possible so it cools down and it doesn't have a chance for bacterial growth. So that, I'm talking about the night before. And then the next day when you pop it in the lunchbox, put it in the lunchbox, keep it cold with whatever you've got in there that's keeping the lunchbox cold, insulated and so on. What will happen is it will not stay below 5 degrees, but it will take a longer time to get up to, say, room temperature. Bacteria will grow any temperature above 5 degrees. So the risks start to get higher and higher as the day gets on and as the lunchbox warms up. And we say 4 hours is a good rule of thumb. As long since the skewer gets out of the fridge in the morning and the lunchbox gets warmer and warmer over the day, around 4 hours, if they can consume that skewer or the meat or whatever within 4 hours of that lunchbox coming out of the fridge and getting to sort of little lunch or an early lunch, then that should be perfectly safe to consume. If it came home with the children at the end of the day, that's well past 4 hours, the lunchbox would not still be cool by then and the bacterial growth would be very high. Then you give it to the dog or you throw it away. So yeah, being very, very mindful. Don't save it for the next day, most importantly, and don't save it as an afternoon snack either, because it will probably be unsafe by that stage. So I hope that makes sense for many people. And if anyone has any questions, just pop them in the chat box, or anyone with any ideas as well around what they do to have, healthy or budget conscious lunch boxes. I'd really love to see those ideas. All right, so yeah, there's that fact sheet as well that you can refer to. And then finally, these are just some lunch boxes that I've thrown together. Admittedly, there is a packaged cheese stick in there, and there is another little packaged thing. So I could get around that by just doing my roasted chickpeas and cutting up my cheese stick. But oh, hello, I've got my pita crisps in there, so that's good. Or a little pre-baked muffiny thing, wrap sandwich, whatever veggies you've got on hand. Again, perhaps those baby cucumbers might have been a bit pricey, but I could also chop up the big cucumber and have those little sticks as well. You could turn them into circles or stars or do all sorts of fun things with bigger cucumbers. So that's just some ideas on putting it together. Like, it doesn't have to be fancy. That is the main point. Okay, so just where you can go for more information. So I mentioned at the beginning that we manage the National Lunchbox Week campaign, and this is what the fact sheet or the website looks like. So jump onto that website and there's lots of recipes. Most importantly, those recipes are really handy and easy, and recipes that your children could do because we've made them really simplistic with those pictures as well. So engage them in the kitchen from a young age, and they will be more, show a bit more interest in what is in their lunchbox and probably more willingness to eat what's in there as well. There's some videos in there, some links to other great resources as well. So be sure to check it out and get some inspiration from there. And that concludes my talk. So if anyone has any questions at this point, I think Alyssa's going to jump in now and bring up if there's any questions.
Thanks so much, Leanne. It's been a little while since I heard the term little lunch. So it's been a blast from the past for me. I definitely came from a containers family as well. We always had lots of little containers. now mum accuses me of never giving them back when I take my leftovers home from mum's house, but it's another issue.
I've got a cupboard full of containers still, and they're still useful. I use them all the time for work as well.
100%.
Yeah.
Um, we've had a few questions already, so feel free to keep popping questions in the chat, everyone. But yeah, we have one that came in really quickly. Eggs are expensive and in short supply. What can we use as substitutes? Now, this person didn't say whether it's like to eat a whole egg versus
Mm.
eggs in recipes. So maybe if you can speak to both.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. They depend on where you're living at the moment. And if you don't have the luxury of keeping your own chickens, then certainly eggs can be quite pricey. So I usually, if you're cooking with eggs, you can get around not using them. So you just omit the eggs and you can replace it with things like a puree, like an apple puree works well in place of eggs. That can be a little bit of a binder. You can also, if you're doing like fritters, quite often, if I'm having to modify recipes for some of my clients, I'll just omit the egg and you put something like some grated cheese or something like that into a fritter, and that will help to bind as the fritter cooks as well. And eggs is just one source of protein. It's not the be all and end all. So there's other alternative foods out there that you can use. I find silken tofu. So tofu is a really good, very cheap form of protein. And the silken tofu can almost have this binding effect because it's quite soft and mixes up quite well in dishes like fritters. And what else could you do instead of eggs? Other protein foods like your legumes, so chickpeas, using hummus, for instance, or those roasted chickpeas are great as well. Baked beans, kidney beans, and so on. So yeah, doesn't matter if you don't have access to eggs. You get by.
Perfect, thank you. I've got another one here about how to select food items at the supermarket without preservatives and colours and flavour enhancers.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, anything that's in a packet, any processed food will have preservatives of some sort. Salt is a preservative. So you could try and shop around the edges of the supermarket and purchase fresh foods, so fruits and vegetables, or you can make your own snacks, so things like your homemade muffins, for instance, and so on. Look, when it does come to purchasing, because we all do at the end of the day buy a bit some biscuits or some sort of processed food, just look for those that has less of a look in the ingredients, and you can see all of the preservatives and additives through there. That's the best thing I would advise. Many of those preservatives, colours, and flavour enhancers, they are quite harmless, but they can be harmful for some people. So some people can be sensitive to certain colours, for instance, and that can create hyperactive behaviour. Flavour enhancers like MSG can sometimes exacerbate, cause rashes in some people, but not everybody. So if you are sensitive to certain preservatives, colours, or flavours, you should really be seeing a dietitian and finding out what those particular items are, those additives are, and then know what to look out for. But generally, if we're eating foods that are grown in nature, that exist in nature, you're avoiding those anyway. So try to eat as much to the real food as possible, and minimize leaning on too much processed food, and then you'll be avoiding a lot of those additives that way.
Perfect. We've had another suggestion come in. Chickpea flour is a good binder instead of egg as well. So there you
Good
go.
one. Yeah, and when you buy a can of chickpeas, the chickpea is a special name for it. I can't think of the top of my head. I'm sure someone does, and they can put in the chat box.
Is
What was
it
it? Aquafaba or something. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
it. So that itself is also a really good binder. If you're making, say, a cake or a muffin or something, you save the chickpea juice and put that in. So thank you for that tip.
We've got another one around shopping. So, would you recommend in-season fruit and veg? I think that came in when you were talking about keeping the costs down when you're shopping.
definitely in season. Local farmers markets can also be a really good option. Backyard. So growing your own strawberries in a little strawberry patch, or fruit trees if you've got room for that sort of thing. Yeah, but think about what could be locally obtained as well. And if you can access your local farmers markets, you're probably going to get much more better quality fruit and vegetables, and it should be a bit cheaper as well. But even the supermarket, if it's locally grown, like, just avoid the stuff that's brought in from overseas. At the moment, I think the kiwi fruits are from the US. Like, I won't even touch them. So wait until they become in season, and then we bring kiwi fruits into the lunchbox, for instance. Grapes are still available, but there'll be a time when it's US grapes. Like, don't go there, and it's going to be too expensive. So yeah, what eating in season is great.
Perfect. Yeah, I've got a friend with a plum tree, and she's a very good friend to have.
Fabulous.
We've got another one around the difference between expiry dates and use bys. So if within 5 days after opening a bottle, can I use the food item until the expiry date, or
Yeah,
will
yeah.
we throw it out after 5 days of opening it?
Yeah, so just take mind of what the guidance is on the label. So often when you open something that's kept in the cupboard, for instance, it could be like a pasta sauce or something like that, and it says once open, use within 5 days, or use within 5 days of opening. Put a little sticker on there to say the date that you opened it, and then make sure you use it within those days, because what will happen is that there's a risk that bacteria will grow in that time. And you take it in and you take it out and so on, the bacteria will grow, and so they advise to throw it out, or mold will start to grow on there. The one thing that I give an exception to is milk and dairy, because when the cheese is off because mold grows on it. So that's pretty obvious. And milk, obviously, milk can last quite some time after it's used by date. You just smell it and you can tell when it's no good. If you have any immune compromised people in your house, so elderly people, or anyone that might be going through like might be living with some sort of illness, then you have to be extra vigilant to adhere to what the labels say. And so, where I might say, oh, the milk could be fine for me, but it may not be for other people. So you always be careful in those instances. But yeah, you do need to use that as a guidance. Best before is different to use by. So if the date says use by, it means after that date, the food may actually have some bacteria growing in it and become unsafe. Whereas best before means that it's not a very high it's not such a hazardous food, so bacteria will not grow that easily in it. So that could be like your breakfast cereals, it could be biscuits, so dry things, and it will say best before. And what will happen is after that date, it'll just start to taste a little bit stale, but the bacteria won't necessarily be growing in it, because it's not a potentially hazardous food that bacteria readily grows in. So I think, being mindful of the sorts of foods that bacteria love to grow in. And if you keep it in the fridge, know that there will be a time when there'll be too much bacteria and mold, and you've got to throw it out. And those labels give us that guidance on that. So yeah, try to adhere to that, particularly if you have immune compromised people living in your house.
Perfect. Got one here. Can the soft thermal lunchboxes be put into the freezer?
Soft thermal lunchboxes, I'm not even sure I know what they are.
I think
Soft
they're like the
thermal lunchbox.
insulated ones, like in the picture that you showed before.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. So if you can take them out of the insulated thing, so you have your lunchbox and then you put that in. Oh, if you mean you pack the insulated thing and chuck it in, well, you can try. And the best way that can tell if it's okay is you put some ice cubes in it, put it in the freezer, and see if those ice cubes stay frozen. Yeah, so all you can do is a trial and error thing, really. And test it for yourself, because there's all these different variations of lunchboxes out there. I'm sure that it will just take longer to cool down if you put it in the freezer, just like it takes longer to warm up when you have cold food in there. Yeah.
Yeah, most of those things say it on the packet when you first buy it as well, but I'm sure that doesn't help if you've already opened the packaging. But
Do a test run.
There's another one around organic. Is organic food really better? So is there a big difference between organic and non-organic, and especially for a baby?
Look, I'm not too bothered by whether it's organic or not organic. I think in some instances, thinking about when we talk about organic, you know, they're the sorts of foods that are grown with less chemicals or pesticides. So there is less of those that risk of chemical contamination. As long as you wash your fruits and vegetables really well, I do always like to peel, particularly my carrots, for instance, and that does get rid of any of those contaminants that might be on the surface of those, particularly those fruits and vegetables. Personally, I don't really have a preference over one way or the other, and it does come down to personal preference. Nutritionally, doesn't make any difference from a nutrition perspective. It's just that presence of chemical residue that could still be within the food. And usually Australian grown food, there's a lot of strict guidance or requirements that farmers have to adhere to make sure that the food is safe for consumption. If you buy your food from overseas, I don't know, there might be more chemicals in those foods. So yeah, again, stick to Australian grown stuff where you can. And yeah, that's your personal choice. I think that's the best answer I can give at this point.
That's great. And then we've got another one around your thoughts on metal versus plastic lunch boxes.
Oh, it's up to you again. Whatever you like, whatever you prefer. I mean, you know, we're trying to steer away from BPA plastics more so, but that's more if it's a liquid. So like your drink bottles, your plastic drink bottles, because over wear and tear, the little microplastics can get into the liquid, and you drink that down, obviously. So metal drink bottles are good. I prefer that. And if you've got like more liquidy type things, like you put yogurts and stuff in, if you could get, you know, maybe opt in for more of those metal based ones could be better from that perspective. Personally, I just take either. If I get plastic, it's a good quality plastic. And as soon as it starts to deteriorate, you should really throw that out. So again, that's a bit of a personal option there, and what works for you and what your children feel comfortable with, and that they can open and close easily as well.
Yeah, we probably have time for one more. So how reliable is the Health Star rating system? What are the ratings based on?
Yeah, that's a good question. A lot of people are a little bit skeptical over the Health Star rating. Look, I think it's good. You're never going to get a perfect means in which to rate foods, because industry will always find a loophole or a way to get around it. And I think the Milo situation was a perfect example when you know, that had more star rating when you mixed it with milk. Of course it would, because it's going to have more protein and calcium. So it's set up based on that algorithm, which I mentioned earlier, whereby it looks at the saturated fat, it looks at the sodium, it looks at the free or the sugar content. It also looks at, you know, whether it's got a level of protein in there, if it's got vitamins, minerals. So there's quite a lot of things that are considered when coming up with that star value. It's actually really good. And for people who haven't got time to look at the nutrition information panel and do that whole comparative analysis that I talked about, just use the stars. Use the stars. It's a quick guide. It's better than nothing. And when you're comparing muesli bar to muesli bar, breakfast cereal to breakfast cereal, just grab the one with the more stars. You're not sure which one to choose? Choose the more stars. It's nice and easy, and it does help make that healthier option. So yeah, 100%.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Leanne. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. That's all that we've got time for today. We'll pop the evaluation link. Casey's just popped it in the chat for us now. And we're about to launch a poll as well. Hopefully you can't hear my baby crying in the background. We'll send you an email after this session once the recording is uploaded onto our YouTube, so that you can watch it back or share it with your friends, as well as the link to the evaluation if you don't want to do it right now. The evaluation just helps us plan for future events like this. A big thank you to Leanne from Nutrition Australia and our partnering councils in Kingston, Knox, Manningham and Maroondah Council. So thanks everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.